Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports, and in today's video we're going to continue our scouting profiles for the 2023 NBA draft class. There's going to be a lot more of these coming out on the channel as well. I know a lot of my viewers here are big time NBA draft fanatics just like myself, and I do a lot of the work so you guys don't have to. I provide all the content you need to see, give you all the background to these players, like a guy like Brandon Miller, who has been in the news recently. So we're going to discuss that in today's video as well. But we're also going to look at him as a basketball prospect and what he's going to bring to the NBA level, which I think is, the most important thing to talk about here. But let's go ahead and start with the press release here from his lawyer, his attorney, regarding the situation with his teammate Darius Miles and the murder of a younger mother in that Alabama area. As one of the attorneys for Brandon Miller, I want to provide additional facts on Brandon's behalf in response to misstatements and reporting yesterday regarding Brandon. Brandon and his family are horrified, saddened by the events that led to the senseless death of Miss Harris, and continue to offer their most sincere thoughts and prayers for her family. Continuing on, he says, on January 14th, Brandon played in a basketball game in the afternoon and later was asked by Darius Miles, his teammate at the time at Alabama, for a ride to the Strip area to go to a nightclub. Mr. Miles brought his legal handgun and left it in the backseat of Brandon's vehicle. Brandon never saw the handgun nor handled it. Again, this is a statement. You can question the validity of these statements or not. As of right now, to my understanding, the district attorney is not considering Brandon Miller at all a suspect or anyone who caused any harm in this situation. Obviously, you can argue if that's true or not, but that's my current understanding of the situation. Further, it is our understanding that the weapon was concealed under some clothing in the backseat of his car. Brandon did not go inside the nightclub. Instead, he left, went to a restaurant to eat. At approximately midnight, Mr. Miles began asking Brandon to pick him up so that they could leave and go to another location and join friends. So on and so forth. Basically acquitting Brandon Miller here. Basically saying that Brandon did not have any role in the actual murder of Miss Harris. And you can read this. It's up on Twitter as well. Jim Standrich is the attorney for Brandon Miller. So definitely a tough situation, one that I don't have all the information on. And for me, I'm not really here to judge Brandon Miller. I'm not here to know all the legal issues. That's not what I'm doing here on YouTube, right? My role is to break him down as a basketball prospect, but I do want to acknowledge Jamiah Harris here. She was, of course, the victim here from capital murder by Darius Miles. To my understanding, definitely a very sad situation. So please keep her in your prayers. I use that term very literally. Keep her family in your prayers as well, because it's obviously a very sad, tough situation for, a mother who had a kid and now is no longer living here on earth. It's definitely a tough situation, and I hope the best for her family and the best for everyone in this situation. It's definitely tough, and there could be impact here on Brandon Miller's basketball career. Again, I don't know all the specifics, but to my understanding, Brandon Miller is not going to be sentenced or charged with any type of criminal activity here in this case. So for Brandon's career, it's definitely a positive for him. Let's get to a video preview here now where we actually jump into Brandon Miller as a basketball player. We're going to start with the player info. Who is he as a prospect? How old is he? Those kind of things. Then we'll look at some strengths of his game, some of the weaknesses as well. Those two things really give you a good feel for what he'll be at the NBA level. We're going to give him a draft comparison. I'm not going to go super far back in terms of who I'm comparing him to. I think a lot of you might have a good idea already of a similar archetype type of player that we've seen in a recent draft. I'll give my estimated draft range. Of course, right now it's very early on in terms of the legal stuff. My current understanding is that the legal issues are not going to play a role in his draft stock. But again, I could be wrong on that. This is very early on. I was planning on covering Brandon Miller right around this time of the season anyway, right before March Madness kind of started to pick up here in a couple weeks. So because of that, of course, the timing of this is not ideal for his draft campaign, but understanding the situation gives a little bit of validity to him staying as a lottery pick this year. And then we'll conclude the video with my overall thoughts. How do I view him as a prospect? I know a lot of people are going to be interested in the draft range and my overall thoughts as well, so make sure you stick around till the end of the video for those things. So who is Brandon Miller? Well, his draft age, he'll be 20.7 years old. He'll be 21 years old after a month in the NBA. So even though he's a true freshman, he's not that young for his class. In fact, he's a pretty old freshman. Kind of remarkable how old he is to be a freshman in college. Honestly, nearly 21 years old by the time he's going to play his first NBA game, which is pretty incredible. He is 6'8" and 205 pounds, so he's a little wiry. He's got a decent frame on him, though. You can tell he's, not some young spry chicken, right? He's got a little bit of muscle mass on his body there, and he's definitely very physically fit. Of course, a lot of these prospects typically are. There's not very many guys who are likely going to go in the top 10 of a draft and not being super physically fit, but we've seen it before where guys, there's question marks about their, their frame, their physique, those kind of things. Brandon Miller doesn't really have any of those concerns. And outside of the legal stuff, there's really not a lot of concern about his game in terms of his ability to play probably in the NBA. And you look at his production this year, he's been very productive. 19.5 points per game, 8 rebounds a night as well, nearly 2 assists per game, with 1.8 turnovers as well. So nearly a 1-to-1 assist to turnover ratio, a little bit less than 1 steal a game and a little bit less than 1 block a game. Clearly you can see he's a little bit of a defensive playmaker with nearly 2 stocks per game. Not great, but not bad either. Kind of the number you're looking at is a requisite for what you'd probably hope to see for a lottery pick. And his shooting splits are really what are going to stand out here. 46.6% from the field. He's shooting above 50% on 2-pointers, shooting 43.1% from 3, which is very, very good, especially given the types of shots he takes. He takes a lot of different kinds of looks from the behind the 3-point line, which is very, very impressive and something that stands out to me. And then he also shoots over 83% from the free throw line. So again, the shooting efficiency's there, which brings us into his first strength, which is shooting the ball. He's a very effective shooter, somebody who knocks down shots from all over the court. He's able to put the ball on the deck, get to spots and finish. He's also able to shoot with range. And one thing I want to say real quick, I will not tolerate any type of jokes or comments on the channel that are not pertaining to basketball specifically, because just given the situation with Brandon Miller, someone died. It's just not something I think that should be joked about on the internet. I'm not trying to be some type of hero here saying this. I just don't think it's really appropriate. So please limit those types of comments. I do not want to be seeing those on my YouTube studio. When I'm going back and looking at kind of your guys' thoughts, do read every comment. Please keep it professional and appropriate. But one thing I want to say about Brandon Miller, he has an argument to be the top shooter in this year's draft, and I know someone on Twitter by the name of Global Scouting, pretty decent following. I kind of keep in track with what they're thinking for some prospects. I typically don't always agree with them on their takes, but I'm going to put one of their tweets on the screen here now. It's pretty good data that I thought was worth sharing. On the season, he's shooting 43% from 3, which is in the 94th percentile, 44.4% from 3 on catch and shoot 3-pointers, which again is 94th percentile, and a little bit under 37% on off the dribble jump shots, which is in the 86th percentile. He's been a very, very good shooter across the board this year when it's, off the move, off the dribble, or somebody who is also spotting up. So I think there's a lot of value in that situation, just given the fact that he's been really, really good in a lot of different ways for Alabama when it comes to shooting the basketball this season. And then let's take a look at some clips here. Of course, that's one of the best parts of this video. And you see the very first clip, he shoots with some really deep range, catches off a Javon Quinterly pass, I believe, and it's one step in basically from the hash. Kind of shows the range right off the rip. And then our next one here as well, we see him catching off the move. And one thing I really want to emphasize here, I'm going to try and slow this down a little bit. Look at his footwork. He catches the ball off of a hop. And because of that hop, it allows him to set his feet completely square to the rim with a good, solid, sturdy base ready to shoot the basketball. He's got a very smooth jump shot as well. I'll put a video in here now of him actually shooting the basketball. Let's take a look at his mechanics a little bit too. Of course, something that is very important. You see the ball, kind of a middle dip, kind of works right off of his core, something pretty typical to see at the NBA level. And with his frame, again, a 6'8", 6'9" wing, gets really good ascension on his actual jump shot, and then also shoots the ball above his head. So he's going to be virtually unblockable on any shot that he's able to get up above his shoulders. He's very, very tall and lengthy in a way that's going to benefit him being able to get shots off, especially against smaller defenders. And it's also a very nice, compact, pretty much textbook mechanical motion that's repeatable. Pretty much everything you want to see in a jump shot kind of stands up true here for Brandon Miller, which is a good sign. Let's take another look at another shot here. This one, he's working across the middle of the floor out of a pick and roll with Bediako. Again, look at the range he's shooting this on. I'll try and pause it here at this spot of the video when I want you to see the range he's shooting with. And again, I want to point out those feet. Look at him reset his feet on the hop, gets him square to the rim, and he lets it fly and it's butter. He's a very, very good jump shooter, especially when his feet are square to the rim. Here's one off the dribble as well. Biggest thing, check the footwork here. Gets his feet set, he's able to knock it down. That's really what I'm watching for. Anytime he gets his feet square, it's probably going into the hoop because he's that good. He's that dangerous as a shooter. Here's one where Adam Miller, I don't know why, but he goes under the screen twice. Not really what I would recommend doing against Brandon Miller here. And off the dribble, one dribble, gets his feet square, pulls up, and again, butter, nothing but net. Here's one, though, where we see him actually working in transition a little bit, and he is off balance. You can see by the way he's going up that he is not actually square to the rim, and he's actually fading off to his right. And because of that, he airballs to the right. Again, this is a pretty typical thing with a lot of shooters, especially at the collegiate level or even lower high school kids as well, tend to struggle with this. NBA players can get away with shooting off-balance shots a little bit more because they have stronger cores and they have repped shots so many times that they know exactly what they need to do. At this point, I think Brandon Miller could be someone who grows as an off-movement shooter, specifically when fading and not perfectly balanced with a clean center balance going towards the rim. But as of right now, he's not a great non-center balance shooter. So I think that he needs to, first of all, get more reps shooting off the move, off fades like this. I don't have any questions about him being a good off the dribble shooter. It's just whether or not he actually has the ability to square his feet or not and kind of come to a nice center of balance. When he doesn't, there's, some misses like this where, in opposing arenas, you start hearing air ball get yelled pretty loud at you. Here's an example, though, against Adam Miller. Again, he goes under the screen again, and I just want to point out the footwork. Obviously, this is a different camera angle, but look at the comparison here. See, he's off the dribble, but his feet are square, and he's balanced, and he's going straight up in his shooting motion. He's not fading one way or another, and again, it's bottoms when he shoots that way. Here, again, against LSU, again, they go under the screen. He makes you pay. Basically, this is a shooting highlight reel, right, for Brandon Miller to show how good of a three-point shooter he is. But that's not all he's able to do, right? He's a more than capable shooter at other areas of the floor. Here's a really nice stride stop against LSU. He gets downhill. He's got a pretty solid handle. We'll talk about that a little bit more later, but operating on the pick and roll with Bediako here, gives a little show right down at the right block, keeps it, comes back over his shoulder, and comes to a centered base. Remember, look at this here. Even though he's moving away from the rim, he actually gets vertical on his jump, and he's not fading away from the hoop. And again, the ball goes in the hoop that way. When he doesn't fade away, when he's not fading left or right or backward, he's an extremely good shooter, and I think these clips probably do some justice into showing exactly what I mean with that. Then another strength of his is wiggle upside, and you might want to know, what do I mean by wiggle? I'm talking about his handle. For someone who's 6'8", 6'9", he's got a handle that a lot of players wish they had, especially the upside component. I don't think it's perfectly polished yet, but there's been clips this year where he shows exactly what he's capable of, and that there's probable room for growth here. I think his most recent game against South Carolina, where he went off for 41 amid everything kind of going on with the situation we talked about to preface this video. Here he comes out of a pick and roll. Of course, there's no actual screen setter actually ends up slipping it here. And he takes Gigi Jackson off the dribble, another guy who's probably going to go in the lottery. And he goes downhill, absorbs contact, and actually finishes above the rim there. And I think the one thing with his handle, you don't see as much wiggle here. This is more of a straight line drive. But he does set this up pretty well in that actual pick and roll. If you watch it again, you see he shifts his center of balance going from right to left, and that kind of sets up the whole straight line drive component here, which is very important to note. Then our next clip here, sorry about the quality on this one. This one's a little bit lower quality, but against Tennessee here, again, goes into that high pick and roll this time with Bediako. And at this spot, he starts to actually snake dribble, which is very high level play. Typically, you don't see this from a lot of college wings. Heck, you don't even see this from a lot of college guards. So the fact that he had the wherewithal and the understanding to do this is pretty impressive already for me. And then he gets to a spot where he goes back to that stride stop again, which we saw earlier. Pretty nice move for him, except this time he's fading away from the hoop. Ends up just missing it, though, after getting fouled. So, naturally, you're going to fade away a little bit on stride stops. It's not the worst thing in the world, but I think the most important component here is, again, the wiggle and the ability to get to his spots while handling the basketball is really what's impressive to me. And it makes me think that there's more of this to come from him at the NBA level when you get on a slightly bigger court, a little bit more spacing, more perimeter talent around you. I think that's all going to be, really positive for him at the next level. Then here we see him cook Adam Miller again. Adam Miller, I'm sorry, this is not meant to be a hate video on Adam Miller. I really liked Adam Miller, actually, before he ended up tearing his ACL a year and a half ago. But Brandon Miller, really nice move here, really good hesitation. You see kind of the component of being a dangerous shooter after you've made some three-point shots. Everyone's worried about you kind of pulling the shot from deep. I'm going to choose my words wisely there. And then he ends up getting downhill instead and drawing a little bit of contact. So I think the wiggle is definitely something that there's going to be room for him to grow in, but he's already got a pretty good base work of what he can build off of. So I think that for the most part, Brandon Miller's in a pretty good spot with what he's capable of doing as a shooter and as somebody who can maybe handle the ball and get to his spots fairly effectively, especially on a more spaced court in the NBA. Although I'm not 100% certain he's going to get there, I do think there's upside, which is why I specifically chose that word, kind of focusing on the potential of that. It's not a given skill for him yet. I think there's still moments where he struggles as a ball handler. He's not a great facilitator yet either, but there's upside into that, which is something if you're drafting him in the top 5, maybe top 10, that's where you see him probably going. Then strengths, another one here, trio of length, athleticism, and skill set. And what I really mean by this is there's not a lot of 6'8" guys in the league that are able to pass, shoot, dribble. I don't know if Brandon Miller's going to be able to do all 3 of those things quite yet. We're going to talk about some of those components a little bit later on as well, but we know the shooting's there, and we've seen a little bit of the handle off the dribble. So there's not a lot of guys in the league, like I said, who are 6'8" and can really do those things. Think about a guy like Torrey Craig in Phoenix. He's going to get a lot of minutes this year, especially after the Kevin Durant trade. Brandon Miller is significantly more talented than a Torrey Craig type player. Now, there's more than just talent that goes into winning basketball games, nailing defensive rotations. Those kind of things are very important. But Brandon Miller has the upside, the appeal that we've seen in a lot of typical prospects who get drafted in the top 5 or top 10, just given the fact that he's 6'8", he's lengthy, he uses that length relatively well, and he's pretty athletic. Here's a clip of him against South Carolina again when he had 41, gets a huge chase down block and actually snatches it down to the ground with him. Definitely pretty impressive, just given, kind of the situation at that point in the game. Then you see him catching a lob from a teammate there in transition as well. Again, let's go back to the one where he ends up getting a post or dunk over South Carolina Gamecock and has a few words to say after that. G.G. Jackson's a really good athlete, and the fact that he's able to blow by him here, I do not think that Brandon Miller's the best athlete in the class. I don't think he's anything close to that. But being 6'8", you don't have to be the best athlete. I think he's an okay enough athlete where he's going to last in the NBA, which is really one of the things you're looking for a 6'8" player. You don't have to be a perfect athlete. You don't have to jump out of the gym. You just have to be able to hold up defensively. And I think his athleticism is up to par on that side of the court. And then you think about the skill set here. One example of this, big moment in that game last night against South Carolina, last night from the night I'm recording this, obviously. He faces up out on the perimeter. Obviously, this was a travel if you've seen any of the close-up plays, but didn't get called, so it's not a travel in my book. And he gets a nice right to left rip through. Ends up going downhill and uses his offhand with a contested finish at the rim. That's the skill set component here, where there's not a lot of 6'8", 6'9" guys in the NBA who can do that. It's a very impressive take, especially at a big moment in the game with Only 4 seconds left in regulation to tie it up. It's an impressive finish. Again, let's take another look at it a little bit closer here. That's just a tough finish. And the skill set is clearly evident when you watch this kid play. He's, again, like I said, a decent enough athlete where he's not going to be a problem in the NBA to have on your team. He's put enough guys on posters this year that he's probably silenced some of the doubters in that regard when it comes to his actual physical athleticism. And then you see here, skill set again, taking Adam Miller off the dribble and hits a nice spin move, which we'll talk about a little bit later on as well. But with the spacing in today's NBA, with the shooting out on the court, if you can have a guy who can attack closeouts like I think Brandon Miller is going to be able to, it makes him a dangerous enough scorer on all 3 levels. Right now, if I had to guess, he's going to score probably a good majority of his points from behind the 3-point line at the NBA level, but he'll also be able to knock down mid-range jump shots, and he'll be able to get to the rim a bit, especially later into games as teams are starting to worry more and more about him pulling 3-point shots. Then they'll, close out a little bit harder on him. He'll be able to attack him off the dribble and get to his spots and finish, which have all been positive signs up to this point for his development for sure. Then we look at another strength here, and that is rebounding, which not something that typically gets enough love. I just got a couple of clips here showing him to be a good physical rebounder and somebody who is willing to do the work on that end of the glass. And on that end of the court, specifically as a defensive rebounder, he's averaging 8 rebounds a game this year. Now, do I think he's going to average 8 a game in the NBA? No, probably closer to 6, maybe 7. But that's what we're looking for, right? If you can add one more guy who can help your team rebounding by going out and getting some contested boards, maybe some uncontested ones as well. If you have 5 guys on the court who can rebound the basketball to a certain extent, you're going to be a better rebounding team in that way. And for example, you look at a team like the Minnesota Timberwolves this year, even with Rudy Gobert, who's been consistently top 3 in the NBA in rebounding this season, the Wolves are still one of the worst rebounding teams because the other guys, specifically D'Angelo Russell, when he was there, did not hit the glass very well. And because of that, they struggle as a team to secure boards and to end possessions. Brandon Miller is going to help you in that regard. And I think that's something that doesn't get talked enough about for people other than centers or power forwards. Brandon Miller, yeah, he's probably a typical 3, maybe plays a little bit of 4 in the NBA just because of his, length and size, but you need to be a solid enough rebounder positionally, and he does a good job in that regard, I think, to the point that's worth mentioning in this video. Then let's look at the weaknesses, and one that I think really stands out to me is playing in traffic, specifically through contact. And it's not going to be the end-all be-all for his career, I don't believe, but I do think it's something that is a definitive area of growth. You see him coming off of kind of a Zoom series handoff here at the top of the key, and then he ends up working downhill, draws a little bit of a bump, and again, look at his center of balance. He's now fading away from the hoop a little bit and leaves it short, goes in to get his own board, and playing in traffic there a little bit, misses a little give me at the rim. Does this define his career? No, I don't think so, but I think it's something that, first of all, a lot of young players typically struggle finishing at the rim at the NBA level, just adjusting to a little bit more length, size, athleticism to begin with. I think Brandon Miller's not super great in this way already. So I think Brandon Miller, his first year in the league, might struggle a little bit as an interior scorer, someone who finishes off the bounce at the rim. Now, do I think he'll be a bad interior scorer his whole career? No, I don't think so. But it's kind of the same adage that you hear every year of, well, the guy's got to get into an NBA weight room and get with an NBA strength coach, and all of a sudden he'll be able to start finishing there. I think some examples of this would be, a guy like Jason Tatum, who, Tatum could always finish, but he wasn't getting to the free throw line in time because he wasn't playing through the contact. I think Brandon Miller's got a lot to learn yet. Here you see another drive off the right wing. He ends up attacking where a seal is. It's actually a very good seal from Bediako there. But he gets bumped off by a guard and loses basically his entire momentum toward the rim and gets bumped off his line. Now there is a foul called here, so it's not the end of the world, right? Still your ball, maybe 2 shots there in that situation, but just given the situation, you don't want to get bumped off your line by a little guard. You just really don't. Now I know it's a foul, but I think playing through traffic and playing in moments of contact is going to be important for him. We go back to that Adam Miller play, right? He's got a nice spin move here, but again, this is avoiding traffic. There's not really any help defender that puts a chest in front of him. It's a really nice finish. You put that up on Instagram, you look really good, right? I do have concerns about whether or not he's going to be able to finish at the rim with actual serious rim protectors in there consistently. And then we'll go back to the one where he cooked Adam Miller as well on that little step back hesitation, and he gets met at the rim. And in this moment, he ends up missing the shot because he draws a little bit of contact, gets bumped off his line backward, and because of that leaves the shot a little bit short. Now that's a foul there as well, so it's not the end all be all for him. He's still going to be an effective scorer at the NBA level. Now I think he's more of a shooter than a scorer, but I still think he has elements that he can be an effective scorer, which is one of those important areas to kind of designate what he's going to be. But if he does improve as somebody who can finish around the rim, playing through traffic and playing through contact, he's going to become an even more dangerous player than he already is offensively. Another weakness here is downhill play and separating from good defenders, and it kind of goes back into his athleticism and his handle a little bit here. Let's go back to his handle against, maybe I think a good one to talk about here is that Gigi Jackson clip. Even when he goes downhill and gets to the rim and ends up getting a poster dunk, with the advantage that he should have had here against Gigi Jackson, with how far Gigi Jackson was out of this play after the initial action, you would think Brandon Miller would have been completely blown by this guy. Didn't really do that. In fact, most good athletes, I think, are going to be able to keep Brandon Miller in front of them. He does rely on good shot making, specifically through contact a bit. So I think that there's going to be some moments here where Brandon Miller's not as good of a downhill player as I think a lot of people are expecting him to be. When you look at the box score, you see, well, the guy's dropped 32, 36, 41 this year. He must be an elite scorer. I think he's an opportunistic scorer inside the lane specifically, and I think that's something that's going to be a challenge for him early on. When we get to the draft comparison, it's going to make sense why I kind of feel this way about him. And then weaknesses. Another one here is his passing. Now, I don't think his passing is absolutely brutal. I think there are flashes where he can be a very good passer. For example, here he gets a nice strong rebound against LSU and throws a beautiful hit-ahead pass, something he's actually done rather consistently this year. He's thrown a good number of those hit-ahead passes, but this one's absolutely beautiful. Off the move, off of a live dribble, puts it right on target, setting up his teammate for an easy layup. But here's another one, gets a nice contested board against Gonzaga this time, and then he pushes the ball down the court and just leads his teammate too far down the court. And the one thing about this too, when you're thinking about who's a good passer and who's not at the college level, you kind of have to watch for, okay, if this pass does get converted, if he's accurate enough with this pass, where does his teammate really go from here? There's really not a window after that for his teammate to really go anywhere with the basketball. So maybe it's a touch pass back across the middle of the court to number 4 there, sprinting toward the rim. But for the most part, I don't really love this decision from him, which is one of the things you're looking for when it comes to passing. You're considering decision making, and he acknowledges it's not his best play there, but for the most part, he's been solid, not terrible. But the 1-to-1 assist to turnover ratio isn't great either. I would say passing's not a strong suit of his, but it's not like irredeemable, right? He's not a brutal passer. He's at least looking up the court. He's seeing his teammates a bit. It just comes down to decision making, and that's something I think he can improve in. So my draft comparison for him is going to be Jabari Smith Jr. I think very similar player in terms of what role they'll fill in the NBA. I know this maybe seems like a slight just with how Jabari's played this season. Don't get too low on Jabari Smith. He's playing with not good guards in Houston. Now, Jalen Green, I think, has potential to be a great guard. Just right now, Steven Silas hasn't given him the framework to do that. Steven Silas should be fired. I feel very firmly about that. But Kevin Porter Jr. is not a point guard either. There's really not a true point guard in Houston. Daishen Nix is maybe the closest thing they have to that. And Rockets fans know those Daishen Nix minutes are not great. So there's a lot of ways that Houston could get better. I think Jabari Smith's going to be right at the center of that. And I think Brandon Miller would really help whatever team he ends up landing on. Now, is he going to be a little bit reliant on good guard play to set him up in spots every once in a while? Yeah. But there's a lot of wings in the league who need that kind of help and maturity, especially when they're young. So Brandon Miller, I think there's some serious scoring potential for him. I don't think he's as good of a defender as Jabari Smith was coming out of college. But I do think he's got similar length, similar upside, similar offensive skill set as a shooter scorer type who kind of probably functions as a secondary or tertiary scoring option for an NBA team if you want to be good. And that's plenty, right? That's what you want. If you have somebody who can give you 20 to 25 a night as your second option in Brandon Miller, and that's maybe a little rich, right? Maybe third option averaging like 17, 18 a night. It's kind of where I see Brandon Miller kind of falling into, which is that's a very good player. You need players like that who can go out and give you some of those buckets and do some nice things for you, whether that's off the catch as a three-point shooter or, maneuvering screens. We've seen him do that again in some of these clips. So Brandon Miller is a player I really like. I think that there's a lot of talent here. My estimated draft range for him, on the high end, he's picked number 3. On the low end, he's picked number 7. And that's, with something that I don't foresee changing with the legal issues, right? If all of a sudden he's, indicted or charged with, basically assisting in the murder trial, whatever, then that's going to completely screw this up, right? So you have to keep that in mind. I'm talking about actual talent here. I've been seeing people on Twitter say, oh, well, is he going to actually go second overall behind Victor Wembanyama? No, please stop saying that. Scoot Henderson is the second overall pick. Don't get it wrong. Drafting Brandon Miller over Scoot Henderson would have been like taking RJ Barrett over John Morant. Don't do it. It's not going to happen. Please stop. Okay. Brandon Miller's at most the third pick at best. He's not going to go second. He's definitely not going first. And at the low end, he's pick 7, right? Because I could see the Thompson twins maybe getting drafted over him. And then I'm kind of giving myself a little bit of room, whether a team likes Anthony Black a lot or maybe a Grady Dick, which I would be kind of surprised to see Grady Dick get drafted over Brandon Miller. I'd be pretty surprised by that. But also, maybe a team falls in love with Keontae George and they feel like they need a point guard, or maybe Nick Smith Jr. all of a sudden kind of restore some of his draft hype that he had before the season, before dealing with some of those knee issues. So, I'm not going to say it's impossible for Brandon Miller to fall out of the top 6, but realistically, I think he's a lock to be in the top 6. Lowest I could see him going is 7th, and then the highest I see him going is 3rd, kind of in that range. I think probably closer to 3 though than he is to 7. And in most of my mocks, he's been recently 3rd or 4th. So it's likely where we're going to see him go on draft night, if I had to guess. And then my overall thoughts. He's definitely worth a top 10 pick. So I'm talking about actual true value here. Of course, when I mock where he's going to likely go, I'm talking about, mocking what GMs are going to do, what executives are actually going to do on draft night. Whereas my overall thoughts, this is basically locking him as a top 10 prospect on my board. Of course, nothing, super crazy to definitive on that. We're going to have a draft board coming out here on the channel soon where I kind of show where I currently have him. That'll be my draft board 1.0. So it'll be highly anticipated here on the channel. I'm really excited for that. And I think the biggest thing is putting the ball in the hoop is valuable. He's a shooter who can score the ball. That's an awesome thing to be in the NBA. If you have somebody who can shoot and then also put the ball in the deck and score off of that, there's a ton of value all across the league for players like that, especially when they're tall and lengthy like Brandon Miller is, and a solid athlete who's going to be able to stick in the NBA. Brandon Miller, I think, is a no doubt, 10-year career type guy who he's going to be in the league. As long as something doesn't happen with that legal stuff, he's going to stick in the league for a very long time. I don't think he's a superstar. I know people are going to say that. Very gutsy performance, by the way. 41 points against South Carolina amid everything going on is pretty nuts. Definitely a marquee moment for him, especially for his college career. But I think he's going to be a helpful winning player. It's not a knock on him saying he's not a superstar. People, when Wiggins came out, people were saying Andrew Wiggins was a superstar and the next Maple Jordan and the second coming of LeBron. It's really fun to watch highlights of guys and say, well, look, this guy should be a, certified first ballot hall, whatever, right? It's not going to happen with Brandon Miller. I don't think he's a superstar. I don't think he's going to average 28 a game in his career or anything like that. I think he's going to be a very, very good player, though, and somebody that all 30 teams wish they had. And that's really the most important thing when it comes down to it. Are you valued around the league? Brandon Miller definitely will. He'll make a ton of money in his career, maybe make an all-star team or two. I wouldn't be surprised by that, especially if he lands in the right situation. So do I see him as a superstar? No. Do I think he'll be a top 10 player in the league ever? Probably not. But this class already has 2 of those guys in Victor Wembanyama and Scoot Henderson, who are just 2 both incredible players. I already have scouting profiles of the channel up on them. So go check those out as well. I had a lot of fun here talking about Brandon Miller today. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I really hope you did enjoy. If you did, leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.